Imagine lying in a hospital bed. Everyone convinced you're in a coma, machines beeping, whispers all around you. But here's the truth. You're wide awake. You hear everything. And what you discover is that your own family isn't praying for your recovery. They're plotting to steal your empire and erase you from existence. This isn't fiction. This is the unbelievable true story of Alexander Washington and how he turned betrayal into the fight of his life. Picture this. You're lying in a hospital bed, completely still, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines. Everyone believes you're in a deep coma, fighting for your life. But here's the twist. You're wide awake. You can hear every whispered conversation, every hushed phone call, every word that people think you'll never hear. Now imagine discovering that the people you trust most in this world, your own family, are planning to destroy everything you've ever built. This is exactly what happened to Alexander Washington, and today, I'm going to share with you one of the most incredible stories of betrayal, courage, and redemption you've ever heard. Alexander Washington wasn't born into wealth. At 42 years old, he had clawed his way to the top of the tech world, becoming one of the few black billionaires among the world's 500 largest companies. His company, Washington Innovations, wasn't just another tech giant. It was his life's work, built from nothing but determination, brilliant ideas, and an unshakable belief that technology could change the world. But success like Alexander's doesn't come without enemies. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemies are the ones sleeping in the bed next to you. It was supposed to be a routine business trip. Alexander's private jet, maintained to perfection, was carrying him to a crucial investor meeting. But somewhere over the Georgia mountains, something went terribly wrong. Hydraulic failure, the investigators would later say. A mechanical malfunction that sent the plane into an emergency landing that nearly cost Alexander his life. When he woke up 3 days later in Cedar Hills Medical Center in Atlanta, something felt wrong. Not just his body, though the red scar across his left temple was a constant reminder of how close he'd come to death. No, something deeper was wrong. His instincts, the same instincts that had built his empire, were screaming that this wasn't an accident. So Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He decided to stay silent, to keep his eyes closed, to control his breathing, to let everyone believe he was still in that deep coma. Because sometimes, the only way to discover the truth is to become invisible. For 18 days, Alexander lay in that sterile room, listening. And what he heard broke his heart in ways that no plane crash ever could. Through the glass doors of his presidential suite, he could hear voices. Familiar voices. The voice of Rebecca, his wife of 7 years. The woman who had promised to love him in sickness and in health. And Marcus, his half-brother. The man he had trusted enough to make vice president of his company. But these weren't the voices of people praying for his recovery. These were the voices of conspirators. "We need to reconsider our strategy, Victor," Rebecca said, her voice cold and calculating. "The board is restless, investors are nervous. We can't wait indefinitely." "Patience, dear sister," Marcus replied. Notice how he didn't call her sister-in-law. Just sister, as if Alexander was already dead. "One more week, and the board will vote to activate the incapacitation clause." The incapacitation clause, Alexander's own legal safety net, designed to protect his company if he was ever unable to lead, was now being turned into a weapon against him. But it got worse. So much worse. Marcus had made arrangements with Dr. Harrison, Alexander's own doctor, to falsify medical reports. They were going to declare him permanently brain damaged, unable to ever recover. And then, they would take everything. As Alexander listened, frozen in his bed but burning with rage inside, the full scope of their betrayal became clear. They weren't just planning to steal his company. They were systematically destroying everyone who might stand in their way. Patricia Martinez, his loyal lawyer and one of the few Hispanic attorneys who had broken through the corporate glass ceiling, was being framed. Marcus had arranged for the Bar Association's Ethics Committee to investigate fabricated charges against her. Bribery, contract tampering, all lies, but powerful enough to destroy her career and remove her as a threat. Patricia had been more than just his lawyer. She had been his mentor, his guide through the hostile world of corporate law. She had believed in him when others saw only a young black entrepreneur with big dreams and little chance of success. And now, she was being sacrificed on the altar of Marcus and Rebecca's greed. Lying there, helpless, Alexander felt something he had never experienced in all his years of fighting prejudice and building his empire: complete powerlessness. He could hear his life being dismantled piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do about it. But sometimes, when we're at our lowest point, help comes from the most unexpected places. It was on his 15th day in the hospital when she walked in. The footsteps were different, lighter, more careful, more respectful. When she spoke, her voice carried none of the false sweetness that so many used when talking to unconscious patients. "Good morning, Mr. Washington. I'm Sophia, your new night nurse." Something about her was different. She didn't talk to him like he was already gone. She spoke with genuine professionalism, with respect, with hope. As she moved around the room, checking his vitals and adjusting his monitors, Alexander caught the faint scent of lavender. It was such a small thing, but after weeks of antiseptic and despair, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Then Sophia did something that changed everything. She sat down in the chair next to his bed, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said, "but I need to tell you something. I shouldn't be here." Alexander's heart began to race, but he kept his breathing steady. What was she talking about? "I was hired 3 days ago to replace your previous nurse. She resigned suddenly, or so I was told. But last night, I found something strange while reviewing your medical records." Sophia paused, and Alexander could hear the weight of what she was about to say. "The sedation levels are well above protocol for your neurological condition, and there are discrepancies in the reflex reports." Alexander's mind reeled. Someone was keeping him sedated? Preventing his recovery? But Sophia wasn't finished. Her next words hit him like lightning. "I'm not just a nurse, Mr. Washington. I'm a specialist in forensic neurology, and I can tell you with certainty that something is very wrong with your treatment. Someone is deliberately keeping you sedated, preventing your recovery." In that moment, Alexander realized he wasn't alone. This woman, this stranger, had seen through the deception that his own family had orchestrated. She had recognized what trained doctors had either missed or been paid to ignore. "I don't know who would do this or why," Sophia continued, her voice filled with determination. "But I promise I'll find out, and I'll help you wake up, even if it means risking my job or worse." Alexander heard her stand up and adjust his foredrip. "I'm reducing your sedation gradually. No one will notice, but within a few days, you should start showing signs of consciousness. When that happens, we can—" The door swung open suddenly. Alexander felt Sophia step away from his bed with practiced ease. "Just checking vital signs as requested, Dr. Harrison," she said, her tone completely transformed back to professional neutrality. "Thanks, nurse," came the doctor's voice. The same Dr. Harrison who was being paid to keep Alexander unconscious. "I'll take it from here." When the door closed and they were alone again, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. But Sophia didn't know the greatest irony of all. She was promising to help him wake up, not knowing that behind his closed eyes, he was already wide awake. He had heard every word, felt every moment of her compassion, recognized her courage in risking everything for a patient she thought was unconscious. That night, As Sophia's footsteps faded down the hospital corridor, Alexander made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He was going to trust her, this woman who had appeared like an angel in his darkest hour, who had seen the truth when everyone else saw only what they wanted to see, who was willing to risk everything for a stranger. She was going to be his way back to the world of the living. But revealing himself to Sophia would be dangerous. If Marcus and Rebecca discovered that he was conscious, if Dr. Harrison realized that his medical deception had been exposed, they might take more drastic action. They had already tried to kill him once with that plane crash. What would stop them from trying again? Yet Alexander knew he couldn't do this alone. For 18 days, he had been a silent observer to his own destruction. He had watched his family plot against him, heard his life's work being carved up like a feast, seen his closest allies being systematically destroyed. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time to fight back. As the machines continued their steady beeping in the darkness of his hospital room, Alexander Washington, the man everyone thought was dying, began planning not just his recovery, but his revenge. And tomorrow night, when Sophia returned for her shift, he was going to take the biggest risk of his life. He was going to reveal that he had been listening all along. But what Alexander didn't know was that his decision to trust Sophia would set in motion a chain of events that would not only save his life and his empire, but transform him from a successful businessman into something much more powerful. A force for justice in a world that desperately needed it. The silent observer was about to become the hunter, and those who had tried to destroy him were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. When someone shows you kindness in your darkest hour, when they risk everything for you without expecting anything in return, it changes you. And for Alexander Washington, lying in that hospital bed surrounded by betrayal, Sophia represented something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. But hope, as powerful as it is, only matters if you have the courage to act on it. And Alexander was about to take the biggest risk of his life. The third night after Sophia had made her promise to help him wake up, Alexander made his decision. As she moved quietly around his room, checking his monitors with the same gentle professionalism she had shown from the beginning, he did something that took every ounce of courage he possessed. He moved his finger. Just twice. The tiniest movement, barely perceptible, but intentional. Real. Sophia froze. Her eyes went wide as she stared at his hand. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the heart monitor, which was now beating just a little faster. You're conscious?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alexander moved his finger once. Yes. The transformation in Sophia's face was incredible to witness. Shock melted into understanding, understanding into determination. This woman, who had already proven her courage by risking her career to help a patient she thought was unconscious, now realized she was looking at a man who had been trapped in his own body, listening to his world being destroyed around him. "Oh my God," she breathed. "How long have you been awake?" Alexander began the painstaking process of communication. One finger movement for yes, two for no. Sophia quickly grasped what he was trying to tell her. She brought letter cards, and together, they developed a system. Letter by letter, word by word, Alexander began to spell out the truth that had been burning inside him for weeks. Since day 3, he managed to communicate. "You've been conscious this whole time? Through everything?" One movement. Yes. The weight of what this meant hit Sophia like a physical blow. This man had been forced to listen to his own family plotting his destruction, had been a prisoner in his own body while those closest to him planned to steal everything he had built. The emotional torture must have been unbearable. But Alexander wasn't looking for pity. He was looking for justice. Over the next several nights, working in whispered conversations and through their letter system, Alexander revealed the full scope of the conspiracy to Sophia. The sabotage plan. The plan to activate the incapacitation clause. The systematic destruction of Patricia Martinez, his loyal lawyer. The bribes to Dr. Harrison to keep him artificially sedated. But most importantly, he told her about Project Aurora. It's a renewable energy system, Alexander explained through their painstaking communication process, designed to drastically reduce electricity costs in low-income communities. It threatens the traditional energy industry. That's why they want me gone. Sophia's eyes filled with understanding and rage. They tried to kill you over helping poor people get affordable electricity? One movement. Yes, this isn't just about greed, Sophia whispered. This is about stopping you from changing the world. Alexander had built his entire career fighting against prejudice and limited expectations. He had become successful not just for himself, but to prove that barriers could be broken, that someone who looked like him could lead, could innovate, could make a difference. Project Aurora was supposed to be his legacy, technology that would lift up communities that had been forgotten by the powerful, and his own family was willing to murder him to stop it. Sophia transformed from a night nurse into Alexander's secret investigator. During her shifts, she observed everything with new eyes. She watched Marcus visit with his fake concern, reviewing medical charts with Dr. Harrison. She noticed how Rebecca rarely came, and when she did, she spent more time looking at the expensive equipment and artwork than at her supposedly dying husband. She's already planning what to sell, Sophia reported one night. I watched her take pictures of that painting on the wall. But Sophia was gathering more than just observations. She was collecting evidence. Using her medical expertise and forensic training, she secretly recorded conversations. She documented the illegal sedation levels. She reached out to her network of medical professionals. One night, she brought devastating news about Patricia Martinez. I have a contact at her law firm, Sophia whispered. The ethics committee is moving forward with those fabricated charges. But I sent her an anonymous warning. Patricia is brilliant. She'll see through this setup. Alexander felt a surge of gratitude. Even in his helpless state, Sophia was protecting the people he cared about. But the most crucial moment came when Sophia brought in Dr. Chun, a forensic neurology specialist she trusted completely. I need you to see this patient, Sophia had told her. I can't say much over the phone, but I think a serious crime is being committed. Dr. Chun arrived during a quiet night shift, when the hospital corridors were empty and the regular staff was occupied elsewhere. For 30 minutes, she conducted a thorough but discreet examination of Alexander, using portable equipment that wouldn't alert anyone to her presence. Her findings confirmed what Sophia had suspected and what Alexander had experienced. There was no permanent neurological damage. The prolonged sedation was not only unnecessary, it was criminal. This man should have recovered weeks ago, Dr. Chun told Sophia grimly. Someone is deliberately keeping him in this state. This is attempted murder. While Sophia was building their case on the outside, Alexander was rebuilding his strength on the inside. Under her careful guidance, he began performing small exercises when no one was watching, flexing muscles that had been still for weeks, moving fingers and toes, preparing his body for the moment when he would need to stand up and fight. It wasn't just physical therapy, it was preparation for war. Each night, as Sophia reduced his sedation levels gradually, Alexander felt more of himself returning. His mind, always sharp, became focused like a laser. His body, weakened by weeks of forced immobility, began to remember its strength. But most importantly, his spirit, which had been tested by betrayal and nearly broken by helplessness, was being reforged into something stronger than ever before. The man who had built an empire through determination and vision was about to show his enemies what he was truly capable of when everything was on the line. The morning of the board meeting, Alexander knew it was time. Marcus and Rebecca were making their final play, confident that they had won. The board was assembled, ready to vote on transferring control of Washington Innovations. Dr. Harrison had prepared his falsified medical reports declaring permanent brain damage. But what they didn't know was that Elizabeth Thompson, Alexander's longtime friend and the only black board member, had been suspicious from the beginning. What they didn't know was that Patricia Martinez had seen through their fabricated charges and was preparing her own legal counterattack. And what they definitely didn't know was that Alexander Washington was not only conscious, he was coming for them. As Marcus stood in that boardroom, distributing his fake medical reports with a triumphant smile, as Rebecca dabbed at her eyes with her silk handkerchief while secretly planning how to spend her murdered husband's fortune, neither of them could have imagined that at that very moment, Alexander was getting dressed. Navy blue suit, perfectly tailored, dark wooden cane for support, and a smile that promised justice was finally coming. Picture the scene: a corporate boardroom filled with some of the most powerful people in the tech industry. The air thick with tension as they prepare to vote on the fate of a company built by a man they believe is dying in a hospital bed across town. Marcus is confident, almost giddy with anticipated victory. "If there are no further questions," he announces, "we can proceed to vote on the temporary transfer of executive powers." Elizabeth Thompson raises her hand with a final challenge. Why isn't Dr. Harrison here to explain his medical findings in person? And that's when it happens. As clear as his conscience, Victor. The voice cuts through the conference room like lightning. Every head turns toward the door, every face registering the same impossible shock. Alexander Washington stands in the doorway, very much alive, very much conscious, and very much ready for justice. The reactions are instant and devastating. Rebecca knocks over her water glass, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the stunned silence. Marcus freezes, his face draining of all color as he stares at what he believes is a ghost. "That's impossible," Marcus stammers, slowly rising to his feet. "You're in a deep coma," Dr. Harrison confirmed. "Dr. Harrison," Alexander interrupts, stepping into the center of the room with Sophia, Dr. Chun, and Patricia Martinez flanking him, "is currently being questioned by police on charges of falsifying medical documents and attempted murder through criminal medical negligence. What follows is the systematic dismantling of a conspiracy." Dr. Chun presents the medical evidence proving Alexander was kept artificially sedated. Patricia distributes communication records showing Marcus and Rebecca's planning in the weeks before the accident. But the most damning evidence comes when Sophia plays a recording of Marcus instructing Dr. Harrison to maintain the sedation until the board vote, after which they could let nature take its course. Bank records reveal the money trail. Substantial payments from Marcus's offshore company to Dr. Harrison, beginning 3 days before the plane was sabotaged. The conspiracy is laid bare in devastating, undeniable detail. As security guards enter to escort the conspirators to waiting police, Marcus makes one final, desperate attempt to justify his actions. "You don't understand. The Aurora Project will destroy our biggest contracts. You're throwing away decades of work for a charity project." Alexander's response is calm, measured, and final. "It's not charity, Marcus. It's the future. And as for the investors, they already approved it. The vote took place last night while you were plotting my death." The irony is perfect. While Marcus and Rebecca were making their final preparations to steal his company, Alexander had already secured the future they were trying to destroy. 6 months later, the justice system has spoken. Marcus, 15 years for attempted murder and corporate fraud. Rebecca, 8 years after accepting a plea bargain. Dr. Harrison, medical license revoked, awaiting trial. But the real transformation isn't in the courtroom. It's in Alexander himself and in the company he built. Washington Innovations headquarters now features Aurora Project solar panels gleaming on the roof, a symbol of the company's new mission. The first pilot project in a public school in an underserved neighborhood has achieved a 78% reduction in energy bills. Stock prices have risen 42% since the announcement of the national rollout. Alexander establishes the Washington Reyes Foundation for Ethics in Healthcare, honoring Sophia by including her surname. They allocate 30% of Aurora Project profits to reforming ethical practices in hospitals, password-protected cameras in critical care rooms, independent external ombudsman, double verification of all medications for vulnerable patients. The company's new research center employs young scientists from diverse backgrounds, people who would never have gotten opportunities in traditional corporations. It's not just technological advancement, it's cultural transformation. But the most profound change is in Alexander himself, standing in his redesigned office, looking out at a city that will soon be powered by affordable, clean energy. He reflects on what his near-death experience taught him. Power without purpose is empty, he tells Sophia as they review plans for the global expansion of Project Aurora. Marcus and Rebecca had everything: money, status, influence. But they wanted more, to the point where they tried to kill me for it. He pauses, touching the scar on his temple that will always remind him of how close he came to losing everything. It took nearly dying for me to understand that true success isn't just about what we achieve for ourselves. It's about what we build for others. In the company lobby, there's now a glass plaque with a quote from Sophia. True strength isn't how much power you accumulate, but how you respond when that power is threatened. It is in our moments of greatest vulnerability that we discover our true essence. As our story ends, Alexander and Sophia are finalizing plans for the largest expansion of Project Aurora, bringing affordable energy to historically neglected communities on 3 continents. Their partnership, born in the desperate circumstances of a hospital room, has evolved into a force for global change. Meanwhile, Marcus contemplates gray prison walls while Rebecca adjusts to federal prison life, paying the price for their betrayal and greed. But this story isn't really about revenge. It's about transformation. It's about how our darkest moments can become the foundation for our greatest triumphs. Sometimes we need to lose everything, or think we're going to lose everything, to discover what truly matters. Alexander's conspiracy wasn't just defeated. It was transformed into a catalyst for change that no one could have predicted. His near-death experience didn't just save his life. It gave him a higher purpose. And Sophia? The nurse who risked everything for a stranger she thought was unconscious? She discovered that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to look the other way when something is wrong. This story reminds us that our greatest strength doesn't lie in the power we hold, but in the integrity with which we use it. That behind the greatest injustices can be born the most powerful transformations, if we have the courage to turn our suffering into purpose. In our most vulnerable moments, we don't just discover who our real friends are. We discover who we're truly meant to become. Alexander Washington built an empire, once through determination and vision. But lying in that hospital bed, listening to his world being torn apart by the people he trusted most, he learned to build something even more powerful. A legacy that would outlast any fortune and touch more lives than any technology. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really made of. And sometimes, in your darkest hour, an angel appears in scrubs, reminding you that you're never as alone as you think you are. The conscious deception became a conscious revolution, and the world became a little bit brighter because one man refused to stay silent, and one woman refused to look away. That's the end of our story. But in the real world, there are Alexander Washingtons and Sophias everywhere. People fighting for what's right. People standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Maybe after hearing this story, you'll recognize them when you see them. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find the courage to be one of them yourself.